In retrospect, Charles's confession of adultery on the Dimbleby program in 1994 was the biggest mistake he's ever made.
Camilla's ex-husband has unleashed a storm of revelations that go far beyond idle gossip, shaking the foundations of everything we thought we knew. His words expose a hidden world of betrayal, secrecy, and long-buried truths that cast Camilla in an entirely new light. These are not whispers of scandal. They are shocking disclosures that pierce through years of carefully guarded silence. As the pieces fall into place, the picture that emerges is darker, more twisted, and undeniably worse than anyone could have ever imagined. The secrets behind closed doors. Every royal tale often begins with the sheen of a fairy tale. Glittering crowns, grand palaces, smiling couples, and the promise of a love story fit for history books. But when the glow fades, when the glamour is peeled back, layer by layer, a very different reality can emerge. One filled with shadows, secrets, and betrayals too sharp to ignore. Behind the grand portraits and polished appearances of Britain's upper class lay the fragile threads of a marriage unraveling, quietly and painfully. Camilla's first marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles was, on the surface, the kind of union that fit perfectly into the world of aristocratic Britain. They were well-connected, well-liked, and admired in society's elite circles. From the outside, they looked solid. Friends, family, and acquaintances assumed theirs was a match built on loyalty, tradition, and shared history. But appearances can be deceiving, and beneath the respectable surface lay whispers that would later shake not only their marriage, but also the very foundations of the British monarchy. Charles and Camilla's affair began in secrecy, through stolen glances, late-night calls, and hidden notes. To outsiders, it looked like harmless socializing, but their bond deepened dangerously. Meanwhile, Andrew Parker Bowles remained unaware, dismissing the faint signs of betrayal. Soon, whispers spread, and he faced the crushing truth. His wife's heart was drifting toward none other than Prince Charles, heir to the throne, whose power made the betrayal even more devastating. To feel replaced in marriage is devastating in itself, but to know the rival is destined to be king. There is a humiliation there that words can scarcely capture. Every doubt Andrew entertained, every pang of suspicion, eventually solidified into a grim certainty. The coded messages exchanged between Camilla and Charles were not merely flirtations, they were confessions, evidence of a love that had taken root in the shadows of duty and loyalty. The betrayal wasn't just about passion. It wasn't a fleeting affair or a stolen moment. It was larger, more calculated, and ultimately more dangerous. What unfolded was not only the collapse of a private marriage, but also the quiet reshaping of the monarchy's future. Love and power became entangled, each decision carrying consequences that reached far beyond the walls of their homes. Because when hearts cross boundaries in the world of royalty, the stakes are never personal alone. They become political, historical, and almost impossible to contain. Camilla and Charles's connection, hidden yet undeniable, began to play its own role in the grand chessboard of the monarchy. Each whispered word and secret meeting chipped away at her marriage, leaving Andrew not just as a wronged husband, but as an unwilling player in a drama that would shape royal history. Every smile seen in public, every photograph published in glossy magazines, became harder to sustain because behind it all was a story of heartbreak, deception, and unspoken power. What the world would eventually come to see as a love story between Charles and Camilla had, at its beginning, been a tale of betrayal, one that left a trail of broken trust and quiet devastation. The fairy tale's surface cracked, and what spilled out was raw, human, and painfully real. For how long could the couple hide their affairs? Before delving into the investigations, let's talk about the love that was between Camilla and Charles. A love too dangerous. This is the point in the saga where the fairy tale unravels and sharpens into outright scandal. What the world saw as a dramatic love story between Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles was far more complicated and far less romantic than the glossy public version that was eventually presented. Their romance was not simply a tale of two people fighting against the odds for true love. It was reckless, selfish, and, in many ways, deliberately manipulative. What happened behind closed doors was not just a secret affair, but a storm of choices that tore through lives, leaving wounds that never fully healed. For decades, the public had been told that Charles and Camilla's bond was a matter of destiny, as though fate itself had chosen them to be together. But the testimony of those closest to the situation, especially Camilla's ex-husband, Andrew Parker Bowles, suggests something much darker. His revelations expose not just a forbidden romance, but a pattern of deceit and destruction that reshaped the monarchy itself. Andrew Parker Bowles was more than a bystander. He was a casualty of Charles and Camilla's affair, which shattered trust, humiliated spouses, and strained friendships. Alongside Princess Diana, he endured both personal and public pain as their marriages collapsed. This was no fairy tale romance, but a scandal that exposed the monarchy's fragility. Secret meetings and intimate calls eroded its image of stability, respect, and moral authority. What began as an affair spiraled into a crisis that threatened the crown's credibility and dignity. Inside Buckingham Palace, efforts were made to contain the firestorm. Advisors worked tirelessly to protect the image of the crown. Every public appearance, every press release, every gesture was carefully calculated to minimize the damage. Yet the truth had a way of leaking out. Tabloid headlines screamed of betrayal. Private tapes and phone calls surfaced, exposing intimate details that were never meant for public ears. With each revelation, the cracks in the monarchy deepened. The crown itself seemed to wobble under the weight of scandal, tradition clashing violently with human desire. Yet somehow, the monarchy survived. The institution did not collapse, though it came dangerously close to losing the faith of its people. What endured, however, was not the romanticized story of star-crossed lovers finally united, but the emotional wreckage left behind. Families were shattered, trust was broken, and hearts were scarred in ways that no crown, no title, and no carefully staged royal wedding could erase. Today, when people look back on the story of Charles and Camilla, they are often told of a triumph of love over obstacles. But Andrew Parker Bowles' account reminds us that the truth is far less flattering. Their relationship was not only about love, it was about power, manipulation, and choices that left devastation in their wake. The crown may have survived the fire, but the ashes of what it cost remain as a darker, quieter story beneath the glittering surface of royalty. While their love has proven to stand the test of time, did the secret wear off after a while? Let's dig into the details of how the secret still lingers even after Camilla became the queen consort. The secrets that still haunt the palace. Even after so many decades, the shadows of choices made in the past still linger, almost like ghosts refusing to be silenced. What was once considered a scandal has not entirely disappeared. It continues to echo through time, resurfacing whenever the past is spoken of or when new revelations come to light. Camilla, the woman who was once branded the other woman, has now taken her seat beside the king as queen consort. To the world, it looks like a transformation story, from mistress shrouded in controversy to the most powerful woman in the monarchy. Yet her ex-husband's shocking words serve as a reminder that history doesn't simply vanish, it leaves footprints, and those footprints are impossible to erase. What makes his testimony so powerful is that it goes far beyond the usual tales of heartbreak and betrayal. It is not merely about a marriage destroyed or trust broken. He paints a far darker picture, one of subtle manipulation, quiet cover-ups, and a pattern of choices that scarred not just a few people, but an entire institution. His perspective gives us a peek into a reality that is often hidden from the glittering public image of the crown. The betrayal, according to him, wasn't just personal. It was systemic. It was about more than two people having an affair. It was about the machinery around them working tirelessly to protect reputations, silence critics, and rewrite stories to fit a more palatable narrative. In his words, the truth wasn't only bent, it was buried, reshaped, and presented as something entirely different from what really happened. For those involved, the damage ran deeper than mere gossip. It left emotional and psychological wounds that, decades later, still haven't healed. And here is where things get even more intriguing. These scars, though invisible, continue to shape the monarchy today. The choices made in secrecy, the manipulations that seemed harmless at the time, and the sacrifices demanded for the sake of appearances all built a foundation for the current royal family. A foundation, however, that is not as flawless as it may look under the shine of the crown. The monarchy may stand tall, but beneath its grandeur lie cracks formed long ago. Cracks created by deceit, silence, and personal suffering. Behind the palace walls, whispers still circulate. Whispers from insiders, observers, and even those once close to the family suggest that the so-called fairy tale ending, the romantic narrative of true love finally triumphing after decades, is not as perfect as it seems. Instead, it may be resting on layers of pain, deceit, and sacrifice, things conveniently swept under the rug in order to uphold the image of the monarchy. What looks like a happy ending to the world may, in truth, be the result of battles fought in the shadows, reputations destroyed, and individuals forced to carry burdens that were never meant for them. The irony is striking. A story once drenched in scandal now wears a crown, yet the past refuses to stay buried. Every time someone digs a little deeper, or every time an ex-husband decides to speak, those carefully constructed walls of silence tremble. It becomes clearer that while history can be rewritten for public consumption, the people who lived through it cannot erase the pain they endured. Their stories live on, sometimes whispered, sometimes shouted, but always reminding us that behind royal pomp lies a human tale of choices, consequences, and regrets. So while the monarchy today may present itself as polished, dignified, and strong, its present cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the past. The ghosts are still there, hovering in the background, reminding everyone that the crown was not simply inherited. It was fought for, covered up for, and in some ways, painfully sacrificed for. And as long as those whispers continue, the story of love and royalty will remain as complicated, messy, and haunting as it was decades ago. So, who is that man who managed to put up with Camilla's secrets from the beginning? Is he truly a forgotten character in the monarchy's big drama? Let's delve into the details of who Camilla's ex-husband is. The man behind the crown's shadows. Our story is not really about the royal couple who dominated headlines for decades, but about a man who, for many years, remained in the shadows. Camilla's ex-husband, Andrew Parker Bowles. To the casual observer, he may seem like little more than a forgotten figure, a side character in the grand drama of the British monarchy. Yet, behind the polished uniforms and polite smiles, lies a man whose life was entangled in one of the most explosive scandals the royal family has ever faced. For decades, Andrew's name was quietly mentioned, if at all, while Camilla and Prince Charles's love affair was dissected, criticized, and immortalized in books, documentaries, and endless tabloid covers. The world became obsessed with Charles and Camilla, with Diana caught at the heart of the storm. But few ever stopped to ask, who was the man who stood beside Camilla first? Who was he really? And why does his voice still matter in 2025? Long after the dust has supposedly settled? Andrew Parker Bowles was not just Camilla's husband, or a convenient backdrop to the romance that would reshape royal history. He was a distinguished military officer, a man of presence and charm, and above all, a witness to the events as they truly unfolded, not the way the media framed them. His story forces us to look beyond the polished palace walls and the carefully managed press statements. It challenges us to see the humanity behind the headlines. Think about it. For years, Andrew kept his composure while living in the middle of a love triangle that captivated the entire world. Imagine the scrutiny, the whispers, the knowing glances from both friends and strangers. For many men, that pressure would have been unbearable. But Andrew remained remarkably silent. He did not rage in public, nor did he sell his story to the highest bidder. To some, that silence may have looked like weakness or resignation. But what if it was something else entirely? What if his silence was not submission, but strategy? Silence can be powerful. It can preserve dignity when chaos threatens to destroy it. It can protect one's family when scandal looms large. And it can hold secrets until the world is ready to hear them. Andrew's silence for decades was, perhaps, his greatest weapon. While others became symbols of heartbreak, betrayal, and controversy, he remained steady, waiting for the right time to speak, or perhaps for history itself to circle back and give his role the attention it deserves. Now, as we step into 2025, that silence is beginning to break. His reflections, his perspective, and his truth may not only reshape how we view Camilla's rise to the throne, but also how we understand the monarchy itself. After all, he wasn't just a bystander. He was a husband, a father, a soldier, and most importantly, a man who lived through the very heart of one of the most scandalous love stories in British history. And this time, the world is finally listening. The effects of the affair was obviously felt in the tone of Camilla's ex-husband as he revealed the secrets. How much did he feel betrayed? Let's find out. The breaking point, a life rewritten. It wasn't only Camilla's husband who bore the weight of betrayal. It was an entire network of lives entangled in choices that felt both selfish and unstoppable. Every decision made within that gilded world of crowns and expectations rippled outward, leaving wounds that could not easily be hidden. Families fractured, friendships strained, reputations scarred. It was never just one marriage quietly collapsing. It was a spectacle, an unraveling that touched more lives than anyone was willing to admit. At the center of it all stood the husband, a man once thought to hold a steady role in his wife's life. For years, he tried to play the part of the supportive partner, believing his marriage had purpose and substance. But there came a breaking point, a shattering realization that what he thought was a life built on love and loyalty was, in truth, little more than a carefully staged illusion. His marriage wasn't a sanctuary. It was a backdrop, a shadow play, for a much larger royal drama in which he was never meant to be the main character. This revelation didn't strike him softly. It wasn't just about unfaithfulness or the private wounds of a marriage gone wrong. It was something deeper, darker. It was about being erased, not gently, not quietly, but publicly, under the harsh and unforgiving gaze of the royal spotlight. Every glance, every whisper, every headline reminded him of the brutal truth. He had become invisible in a marriage that was never really his to own. Imagine the humiliation of watching your role as a husband dissolve, not behind closed doors where dignity could still be preserved, but on the world stage, where every movement was analyzed, every silence was questioned, and every expression became a headline. The palace walls, gilded with history and power, did not protect him. They exposed him. The very place that was supposed to elevate and honor the family name became the theater of his personal undoing. And while the public was quick to draw conclusions, to paint him as insignificant, irrelevant, and easily forgotten, his truth remained hidden. For years, the narrative was controlled by others, the royals, the press, the storytellers who never paused to ask him how it felt to be cast aside. To the outside world, he was little more than a footnote, a placeholder in someone else's grand romance. But behind the silence, behind the stiff smiles and the official photographs, there was a man whose perspective had never been heard. Until now. For the first time, his voice rises above the noise, breaking through the layers of gossip and speculation. His story isn't just about heartbreak, it's about betrayal on a stage so vast that the whole world was the audience. It's about the pain of watching your life rewritten before your eyes, as if you were never truly there at all. And it's about the quiet strength it takes to finally speak, to claim the truth that was buried for so long, and to reveal the cost of being erased from a history that was once yours too. Long before the revelation of Camilla's ex-husband, there has been a similar concern raised about the affair. Who said what? How much was the person affected? Let's dive into the details of the love triangle that shook the monarchy. Inside the royal family's love, betrayal, and scandal, Charles and Camilla's love story stretches back much further than many people realize. Their relationship began in 1970, years before Diana Spencer ever came into the picture. At that time, Charles was still a young man preparing for his future role as king, while Camilla was already moving in elite social circles. They shared an immediate bond, but life and duty soon pulled them apart. Charles left to serve in the Royal Navy, while Camilla eventually married Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973. Still, their connection never truly faded. In fact, Charles became the godfather to Camilla's son, a role that highlighted just how closely their lives remained intertwined despite the circumstances. By 1981, Charles was under immense pressure to settle down, and his marriage to the young, beautiful Diana Spencer, the world rejoiced, believing it was a perfect love story. But beneath the glittering tiara and golden carriage, cracks quickly appeared. For Diana, the first signs were small but deeply unsettling. Just before their wedding, she discovered a bracelet Charles had specially made for Camilla. A token of affection meant for another woman, not his bride. Later, during their honeymoon, she noticed that Charles wore cufflinks given to him by Camilla, a painful reminder that his heart wasn't fully hers. By 1986, whispers turned into reality. Charles and Camilla's affair had reportedly reignited. Diana, aware of what was happening, finally confronted Camilla in 1989 at a private gathering. In that tense moment, Diana laid her heart bare with the haunting words, "I want my husband." It was a declaration of love, desperation, and frustration all at once, showing the world that the royal marriage was far from the perfect picture painted in public. The union limped on, but the strain was undeniable. In 1992, Charles and Diana formally separated, sending shockwaves across the globe. That same year, the scandal deepened with the leak of the infamous Tampongate tapes, intimate recordings of a late-night conversation between Charles and Camilla. The nation was scandalized, and the monarchy faced one of its most humiliating moments in modern history. In 1994, Charles tried to salvage his public image by giving a television interview. For the first time, he admitted to being unfaithful, though he carefully stated it only happened once his marriage had irretrievably broken down. He described Camilla not as a lover, but as a longtime friend, a phrase that did little to calm the storm of criticism. Then, in 1995, Diana had her turn. In her groundbreaking Panorama interview, she spoke candidly about her crumbling marriage and the toll of Charles and Camilla's relationship. Her honesty captivated the public and shifted sympathy firmly in her favor. That same year, Camilla and Andrew Parker Bowles divorced, removing one more barrier between her and Charles. Eventually, the pressure became too great even for the royal family. In 1996, with the Queen's approval, Charles and Diana finalized their divorce. What had started decades earlier as a quiet romance had grown into one of the most dramatic and controversial love triangles in royal history, forever altering the monarchy's image and leaving an indelible mark on the lives of all involved. While the revelation was worse than people's expectations, what implications does this have on the future of the monarchy? Let's find out. What this means for the future of the monarchy. As we approach the end, the camera doesn't just fade to black. It pulls back, slowly widening the frame. What we are left with is not simply a collection of private confessions or a handful of uncomfortable truths. No, what we have uncovered goes much deeper. These aren't random whispers or casual revelations. They are cracks in a grand institution, an establishment that has stood for centuries, one that survives not by accident but through a carefully constructed image. The monarchy has always been more than a family. It is a symbol. It is meant to stand for stability when the world feels uncertain, for tradition in a rapidly changing society, and for loyalty in an age of shifting allegiances. The crown is not just metal and jewels. It represents trust, continuity, and a sense of unshakable permanence. But what happens when the very foundation of that symbol is riddled with secrets, betrayals, and contradictions? Can an image built to last forever survive when the truth beneath it is far less perfect than what the public is shown? Camilla's ex-husband doesn't speak like a man eager to add fuel to gossip columns. His words cut deeper. They push us into uncomfortable territory, forcing us to face a question that many would prefer to leave buried. His testimony doesn't just rehash old scandals. It destabilizes the very story the monarchy has told about itself. If the past was marked by betrayals, hidden affairs, and carefully orchestrated cover-ups, how much faith can anyone truly place in the promises of the future? For centuries, royal families have thrived on spectacle. The grand weddings, the coronations, the balcony appearances, all of these create a picture of unity, of honor, of continuity. But when we look closer, behind the polished surfaces and rehearsed smiles, we begin to see the fractures. The problem with cracks is that they never stay hidden for long. They spread, they deepen, and eventually they force everyone to acknowledge that the wall isn't as solid as it once appeared. This is where the unease creeps in. If betrayal could live at the heart of the monarchy in the past, what stops it from haunting the present or repeating in the future? If the supposed guardians of tradition have themselves struggled with loyalty, what does that mean for the institution they are meant to embody? These aren't idle questions. They strike at the core of why monarchies exist at all: to project reliability, to be above the flaws that ordinary people wrestle with every day. And yet, what if they are not above it? What if the palace walls, no matter how tall or gilded, cannot keep out the very human weaknesses of pride, ambition, jealousy, and desire? What if the crown, with all its weight of history, is still fragile enough to crack under the pressure of private sins becoming public knowledge? Camilla's ex-husband may not have set out to be a disruptor of royal mythology, but his voice lingers because it shifts the conversation. He doesn't just remind us of what once happened. He makes us wonder what could still unfold. He makes us ask whether the monarchy is truly as unshakable as it appears, or whether its survival depends on how well it can conceal the imperfections of those who wear the crown. So, as the camera pulls back one final time, we're left not with a neat conclusion, but with a haunting paradox. The monarchy is meant to be eternal, yet it is carried by deeply human people. It is supposed to represent trust, yet its history is marred by betrayal. And if the past was this messy, then the most unsettling question remains. Can the future ever be truly secure? Or will the cracks we see now be the ones that eventually bring the entire institution crashing down?